Welcome everyone. We'll wait a couple minutes. Katie, how are you going today?
I'm well. How are you going?
I'm good. Always a bit tricky with public holidays. Shortens the week, but the work doesn't disappear, does it?
Exactly. I know it's felt like we've had a few of these back-to-back kind of public holidays sneaking in there that have really put us back a bit.
Yeah. Couple of cracking games of footy yesterday. Did anyone get a chance to watch it on the call today?
No, my team unfortunately lost last night, which is a bit sad.
It's always disappointing. Mine did too. So anyway, we'll bounce back next week.
Exactly. All right. Maybe we'll.
Couple more minutes for stragglers. What do you think?
Yeah. I can see we've got Shauna with us on the call. Hi, Victoria, that's just joined us. Cool. I think we can kick off.
Awesome. Over to you, Katie.
Cool. So today we are diving into best practice spend management for construction in 2023. Now, this is kind of a can of worms because we know, I guess, that there's, a tech list as long as your arms of different products and software that, are out on market that are sort of being pushed. So we're here to kind of sort the wheat from the chaff and dive into what that looks like for spend management. So before we kick off, though, we will do an acknowledgement of country. So in the spirit of reconciliation, we'll respectfully acknowledge traditional owners of country throughout Australia and their connection to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to all First Nations people, past and present. Thanks, Jessie. So a little bit of housekeeping. We will have some interactive polls throughout this session because we want to get to know you. Also, if you do have any questions throughout the session, we do have that little Q&A chat bubble down the bottom to pop them into. We'll just see that a little bit more easily than if it's in the chat. And lastly, we are recording this session, so it will be shared with you afterwards in case there's anything that you miss as we're talking. Thank you. So what are we going to be looking at today? We're going to be diving into the difference between automation versus digitisation and what that kind of means for your software stack in your business. We're then going beyond buzzwords, so what to look for when considering a spend management solution. We're looking at then some of these optimizations in spend management in practice, which Jessie's going to run us through, and then we'll be going into question time. But before we continue, who are we? So I'm Katie. I work in product marketing at Wheels. So that means that I'm essentially Wheels' #1 product evangelist. I love our product. I love helping our customers get the most out of our product and seeing them really optimize and, change their business for the better and help their team out along the way as well. And I'm joined by Jessie.
So I'm Jessie. I work in the success team at Wheel. Essentially what our role is to, solve business problems for customers and work closely with them so they get the best value out of Wheel. I started off in public practice, so I'm a recovering ex-public practice accountant. I worked at Xero, so, dealing with accounting systems isn't necessarily uncharted territory, excuse the pun.
Right, so we'll kick us off with a bit of a poll. So let me just set this live. So when it comes to the most common buzzwords you hear when you're looking at new tech, which sort of comes to mind as one that you hear the most often? I'll give you a few seconds for those answers to come in.
There's some in there that we've definitely heard before.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of revolutionized, digitized, automate.
Streamline, AI, automate, cool. Big one.
Thanks, Jessie. Cool. So yeah, we had a real mix of answers there across. I think the winners were automate and streamline. Thanks, Jessie. So we will start off though by talking about, I guess, digitisation versus automation, because these are sort of words that come up a lot And I guess it's important to kind of know what they mean and how they factor into how they factor into I guess when you're considering new tech. So digitisation is kind of step one towards the idea of automation, which is where you're taking manual processes that are quite physical and replacing them by digitisation. So whether by cloud-based or simply online. And then automation is when we kind of take that one step further. And those sort of repetitive tasks that you were systematically carrying out are then able to be executed without human intervention or with very minimal human intervention. So with tech tools, most will be aiming to do either one or both of these things. And we kind of see the table stakes of new tech as being that they should save you time and money, because to be honest, if they're not doing both of those things, then what's the point in bringing a new solution into your business if it's taking you more time or costing you more money? But so we can go a little bit deeper then and think about how we can consider, I guess, choosing new tech. So thanks, Jessie. So we can start to think about, beyond time and money, the two obvious things, can this tool help you unlock other areas of operation? Is it taking mundane or repetitive activities off yours or your team's plate and creating space for more strategic tasks? And I think, the next one, and I know Jessie's got a good example here, but does it go beyond breaking even and significantly help with managing costs or increasing profit?
Yeah, and I think with that one, it's interesting, right? I've worked with a lot of automation tools in my young career so far, but what I really do start to see is you got to ask the question, what's an hour of my time worth? And you got to think about it in a couple of ways. One, there's the hourly wage that goes into what your time's worth. Two, there's the opportunity cost of, could I be working on different problems? Is there different things that I could be solving? Three, what's this holding back in terms of other people? Is the hour that I'm spending here a bottleneck for other people as well? So it's a really good question to ask to help you analyze and understand is that, all three of these points hitting home is, what's an hour of your time worth and how is these three contributing to that as well?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, and then we kind of have areas like, is it operationalizing your business in another way? So thinking outside the box beyond like, it's automated some tasks, like has it actually unlocked someone else downstream? I think is really important. Also driving better decision-making through insights and analytics. And again, I know one of Jessie's favorite quotes is, well, the accurate, timely financial data is the lifeblood of every business. And I think that's a really important factor as well. If you don't have that data at your fingertips, it can be hard to kind of drive the right decisions. And also then there's the key point of, are you actually able to centralize your tools and solve for multiple things at once with one piece of software?
Absolutely. And that's it. Accurate, timely financial information. Can't get enough of it.
Cool. So we thought we'd jump in here and talk to, I guess, one of our customers that has kind of been through that process and really seen this evolution within their business, and I guess give a little bit of background around that journey. So they are a commercial electrical business that operates in Western Sydney, over quite a large area actually, even though their HQ is in Western Sydney. They've been in business around 8 years. They've got 37 employees and they have one full-time and one part-time finance manager that have been managing all of that. So pretty small finance team that were really kind of held back by sort of time-consuming tasks that they didn't want to do, but they had to get done. So they were often chasing up receipts. They spent a lot of time, just balancing the books and chasing up little bits of information that they just that wasn't at their fingertips, I guess. So they found it really difficult to get accurate costing across jobs, often because they didn't have all the information about a job until long after the fact. There was a lack of, they gave me this example. I don't know if this is an exaggeration, but that a lack of clarity around making purchases meant that a $5 expense could be holding up, a $500,000 job. So, an employee that wasn't sure the best way to expense things, they were concerned about putting it on their own card, whether they would get reimbursed. So there's this kind of delay that was really holding up businesses. holding up their jobs. Also things like being locked into certain fuel cards or supplier accounts was costing money because, they were having to maybe drive well out of the way or all the way back to, near where their HQ was to go to a certain supplier when they could have gone closer to where the job was, just because that's where they had the supplier account set up. So all in all, they knew that they had a lot of leaky buckets across their business, but they didn't quite have the time or the data inputs to know where those optimizations could be made. So next slide, Jessie. So the first big change they kind of brought into their business was they moved from a desktop accounting software that was maybe a bit antiquated and moved on to Xero, which is obviously a faster cloud-based accounting software. One that Jessie's, very familiar with. So this then kind of, freed up enough of their time and unlocked them enough that they started looking into the next piece of the puzzle, which for them was really their expense management process, which is what led them to finding Wheel. So by bringing Wheel into their business, they were able to replace their fuel cards, their supplier accounts. They weren't waiting for bank products. They were no longer spending time on manual cost tracking because they had all of that automated with inside Wheel. They got rid of their approval tool that they were using to track all of their expenses and approve them. They were able to significantly reduce the amount of data entry they were doing. And importantly as well, their team went out of pocket across their spending activity, which is a big bonus for team morale as well, not feeling like they're wondering when they're going to get paid back for a work expense.
And it comes back to that point I was making about, what's an hour of your time worth? Because at the end of the day, what I see a lot of businesses struggle with is that, moving to Xero is one thing. You're never necessarily going to have the perfect time to do it. You just need to take that first step and start to free yourself up, because you sort of become in this snowball pattern where I don't have the time because I've got all these reports I've got to build at the moment. I've got to get specific things done by a specific time. I don't have the time to evaluate new software. And because you don't have the time to evaluate new software, you're sort of bogged down doing this work, which doesn't really help and isn't freeing you up, isn't freeing up the team. So that's really where you start to unlock yourself. By moving to Xero, what I saw, particularly with this organization, is one, you have better information at the drop of a hat, which meant they were able to, again, decide whether the job costings were going to allow them to take on a new job in a different area. Very interesting sort of side of, automating their processes and having that timely, accurate financial information. But then what happened is it's again a snowball effect, but in the positive direction. It's going down a hill that is really going to help the business. Is that they had more time from moving to Xero, which means that they're able to evaluate the other leaky buckets within the business, which was in this particular instance Wheel. And so it's always a question of time. What's an hour of your time worth, but also how could it be better spent and how can we automate that? And those are some of the questions I think you got to ask. What's the most pressing thing when you are thinking about moving from more manual systems and digitizing them and moving to, say, something like Xero or Wheel?
Yeah, for sure. So all in all, yes, they were able to save money by replacing products. They were also able to save time by streamlining these manual admin processes. But look, honestly, a lot of the benefits that they're most impressed by were the ones that happened below the iceberg. So things like they started to see jobs moving faster because there were no more roadblocks on purchasing, essential items. They were saving money through being able to shop around on tools and fuel as well. They weren't locked into certain fuel cards or supplier accounts. They were getting accurate and up-to-date costings across all of their jobs because they weren't getting, a flurry of receipts months later about jobs that had passed. And all in all, they were able to bring on more staff. They've since grown their business and they're able to win more tenders. So it's kind of all been on the up from them just through, a few simple optimizations.
And that's it. I think some of the questions they would have been asking is, what is that lack of information if we're working on a desktop system? What's the time delay of us having that accurate timely information costing us in terms of being able to take on new jobs, and how are we going to free that up in the future by using Wheel? Those are some of the questions. And look, at the end of the day, the proof's in the pudding. The business has grown. They've taken on more staff. They're winning more jobs, and it's manageable. I think that's the other thing you're thinking about with digitisation, hey, Katie, is that if you're going to grow, you can't just grow. You need to put in the groundwork to have the tools that allow you to scale. And that's a very key part, because if you do bring on more staff and win more tenders and you have inefficient processes, if taking on a new job means 5 times the amount of admin work, you times that by 5 jobs, you got 25 times the amount of admin work, and you're not ready to scale.
Yeah, that's a great point as well. That scalability is a really important factor.
You need to do it before you go.
Yeah, exactly. Get those foundations in as soon as possible.
Yeah. Awesome.
So this will be over to Jesse's area of expertise now. He's going to be showing you a couple of examples of what this kind of looks like in practice through a live demo. So Jesse, I'll hand over to you. Mute myself a little bit.
Thanks, Katie. Well, look, I'm going to take a dive into Wheel. I'm going to jump into the account. I'm going to show you through some of the ways that this particular organization did start to manage and use Wheel in conjunction with Xero. What I'm going to focus on is how to issue virtual cards and sort of replace those field cards. I think what you're thinking about there is it definitely unlocks staff to make more flexible purchases, and it's particularly with supplier accounts. Particularly if you're an organization, we've got a couple on here, maybe rural. You don't know where you're going to be able to have a supplier account. There might not be a Bunnings which you have PowerPass access to with rural jobs, so you might need to make a purchase at a local business. Having a wheel card and the ability to issue one in the matter of seconds, that's going to unlock and help scale that ability to purchase and get the job done. How approvals can help provide a bit more control with overspending. I think that's really important, and particularly in this macroeconomic environment. A lot of organizations I'm working with, they are trying to dig into where is some of the extra fat in these budgets and how can I cut that out, because that's going to be the difference between us swimming and competitors or different organizations that work in the same industry sinking. I think the best construction organizations will be the ones that are able to keep this under control. And also digitizing and automating the reimbursement process. Wheel has a pretty intuitive system which relates to personal reimbursements. You've got all the approvals in place to make sure that staff are going to have checks and balances to make sure they can't just reimburse anything that they please. But the other really important thing is, how do we retain good staff? It is really hard, and I have a lot of friends that work in different trades, but some of them own their own businesses. They've talked to me about how hard it is to retain good workers. And so we really want to make sure that if we are going to get them to spend on behalf of the business, we may never know what the financial situations of some of our staff is. So we really want to make sure that, one, yes, they don't get free rein, but two, we want to retain good talent. And so that sort of starts with us enabling them. So I'm going to jump into the Wheel account and we'll go from there and start to look at some of these different situations. So great, you can see my Wheel account here. At the top of the page, I've got my account balance. That's essentially all the funds that I have accessible. And all of these budgets in the middle of the page, essentially what they've done is, when I add users onto this budget, it's issued them a card, okay? And those cards can be issued in a matter of seconds for us to get payments made on particular jobs. And what we're going to do is, I'm going to create a new budget today for fuel cards, and we'll take a look at some of the different ways we can set up a budget. But the main thing I want to think about here is how this unlocks an organization. Instead of waiting for weeks for a card to be issued, you can issue a card in seconds. You can set limits on how much can be spent. And then on top of that, you can delete it. All the transactions are going to remain in the account for at least 7 years for audit purposes. So look, you really can issue, delete cards in the matter of seconds and unlock that spending. So look, I'm going to create a new budget. I'm going to call this one fuel. And what we're going to do is, every month we might have about, $2,000 worth of fuel going through some of the cars that we have on hand. Now, these payments are going to be made by James, Joseph and Mark, and maybe myself as well. So look, by including these individuals on this page here, once I create the budget, in the mobile app, they will have access to a wheel card automatically. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to add Kimberly as the approver. So if any one of these individuals needs to spend a little bit more than the budgeted amount, what we might do is set a limit on all of them. So we've all got $500 a month to spend on fuel. If any one of these individuals needs to spend a little bit more than $500, they can make a request through the mobile app. Kimberly's going to get a notification, can approve it from the web app, from the mobile phone, and that's automatically going to sort of top up the amount that they can spend throughout the month. The main thing here is, one, with these fuel cards, we're not locked into any providers, but what we have access to is pre-approved funds for that. And what that also is going to allow us to do is, one, limit the specific categories to fuel. So if I scroll across on here, great. That's going to also help us with the end of month coding. There's only going to be one option that's tied into the account code, the GL code. So one, I don't need to spend extra time reallocating to the correct place. And two, we've got checks and balances to make sure that we're not overspending here. So I create that one. Essentially, that's issued cards to all of these individuals. How easy is that to really start to control spend? First, your first line of defense is that they can only spend $500 within the month. Second one is that you've unlocked spend through being able to issue that in a matter of seconds. Now, with the budget I have here, it's $500 per month. That's a hard upper limit. It's not cumulative. So next month, if I spend only $250 of this budget, it's only going to top up by $250 next month, which is generally what you want. You don't want there to be a build-up of funds that they could use. So that's really how you're going to stop overspending is, one, that hard up limit stops you from being able to spend over the amount. And two, if I spend under that, I'm not going to have access to that the next month, which is going to help make sure we're staying underneath that $500 per month. Now, the next couple of things I've got a high street project and Lewisham job. If I look into the high street project, this is a really interesting tool. So we've got a once-off budget here, which means there isn't going to be a top up for this one. And really what we're thinking about here is James, Joseph, Mark, all these individuals, they have access to cards, which allows us to then, spend money and send that, make payments so that, if there's any materials or tools that we need to get for the job, we could get that at a drop of a hat. We're not cornered into any particular suppliers. And so what that means is we've issued them a card, they can get the job done. And we don't really need to rely on particular vendors to work with. Particularly if you're working out of town, or you need emergency access to funds at the drop of a hat. You may not have the luxury of being able to pick and choose in certain situations. Beggars can't be choosers, as they say. So if you need to get the job done and you need that emergency access to funds, there you go. Just through creating this budget, issuing the cards, one, we know that Kimberly's going to have oversight over all the transactions and manage the top-up requests, but two, we've gotten access to those funds very quickly. Now, from Kimberly's perspective, Kimberly is going to be approving the top-up budgets. Kimberly wants to have oversight on what's going through the account. If I open to the transaction table, this is a really helpful place to then come through and visualize what's going on. And I think, some of the instances which I've seen with the transaction table, which are really interesting, is sending out particular staff members potentially for business development out rural, and they need to catch a flight. I was working with one customer and I was able to see a transaction 10 minutes later with, I was on a call with the customer and they sort of showed this transaction which wasn't in line with policy. And they were able to pick it up 10 minutes later, have a conversation with that employee and say, hey, look, mate, that's not what the card's for. You're not meant to go out and have a drink before the flight. So the visibility there, one, yes, it's helping to maintain collective accountability within the organization, but two, they're able to recover those funds. And if you've got processes which are a bit outdated, they might be a bit manual. If I'm filling this out in a spreadsheet, one, I've got to rely on the staff member to fill out that information correctly and give it to me in a timely state. But two, how can I vet that information? It's really difficult if the processes are a bit outdated. So, looking at this table here, I'd be able to come through, see the transaction, the tax invoice in a matter of seconds. And at the end of the day, staff don't want to be difficult. They don't want to not provide us that information. It's mainly that if it is an outdated system, it is difficult for them, so they put it in the too hard basket. Staff aren't going to purposely try to skirt around the rules. It's just the nature of, if it's too difficult, I'll put it off to another. So by setting up these processes, one, we're able to make it easier for staff to get us that information, which means they're more likely to. And two, we're able to see what's going on very clearly. Now, looking at this transaction table as well, I can see we've got the approved by column. And this is, again, it relates to that collective accountability within the organization. I trust the team, and the organizations I work with, they trust their teams. But at the end of the day, if it comes down to audit and brass tacks, you need to be able to prove that you've been able to review these transactions and make sure that spending isn't just on anything that people want. And again, that comes back to that point I was talking about with organizations that are able to identify where overspend is happening, any purchases that are outlined out of policy. Those are the areas which you just can't have in a very, let's be honest, it's a tricky economic situation that we're in. So those are the areas that you can cut back on. And having this approved by column, this is only available to admins or approvers. It might be project managers on the account. They're the only ones that can access this column, and they can come through at the end of the month and go, okay, let me check this one here. Was this an Uber? Okay, that's looking pretty good to me. I'll give the check of approval for this one. So one, we can export this to CSV and provide it for different individuals if we need to, but we've got this centralized in one place, and it's been done in a matter of seconds. So approval processes, you can check off on the post-approval at the end of the month, but pre-approval as well. You've got that budget level approver who's going to manage any remittance of extra funds, which is going to be Kimberly. So pre and post-approval, we're managing. Finally, with the reimbursements, this is a really interesting one. You might come through and create a new reimbursement in here. You upload a tax invoice, you fill out the information, and instead of filling out a spreadsheet, I just need to fill in the same information, apply that to a budget. But the really interesting thing is, as we come back to the idea of the budgets and the account balance, is that staff members could theoretically submit a reimbursement for a personal reimbursement for a business expense. And if you set it to the same day for remittance, they could get paid out the same day, as we're a new payment platform. So think of Osco. So staff members that might have a bit of a heavy outflow of cash, they can get paid out from this account balance the same day once you've approved it. And again, that's how we sort of retain staff. No one wants to be out of pocket for a business expense. No one wants to go into the job and think, when am I going to get paid for this? So do I have to wait 2 weeks, 4 weeks for the next payroll run? You can put a bit of stress on them. And if you want to keep that talent, they might look for an organization which, one, issues them a card to help them get it done. But two, if they are making that personal reimbursement, it helps pay them out quicker. From our perspective,
the other thing there, Jesse, is that you just showed us a great example of the desktop version, and we also have a mobile version of this, which means that the staff can literally do it on site as they're making the purchase. They can snap a photo of the receipt and submit that reimbursement in. So there's really no friction in that process.
100%. It's a really good point. It's a really good word, is friction. Is that one, that idea of staff putting things in a too hard basket. It's just where there's friction. They're just going to put it off because, one, they can, but two, it appears like it's a lot of work. So just something to think about there is how we can sort of make their lives a bit easier. And as you said, Katie, we've got that mobile app, which just means you need to snap a photo, input some details. And again, same for the compliance rates of general projects with the cards that we have on hand. Very simple to manage because, again, I'll say it simply, you make it easy for staff, they'll make it easy for you. So look, those are some of the things that we do want to touch on, is creating budgets, managing the approvals and having that collective accountability and visibility over what spend's occurring. And finally, just enabling staff and having the checks and balances in place to enable them, but also at the end of the day, get the spend happening through reimbursements tool. Those are some of the ways that this particular organization saw benefits from Wheel. Not sort of limited to these, but exclusively looking at these features. That's really what they were able to digitize. And if you think about it, some of these processes, one, for junior staff that have just jumped on, you're not going to give them a card really. So creating a budget and issuing cards in seconds, huge benefit, because, hey, they're just new. I'm not going to issue them a card. It's just too much work, too much hassle. Then when it comes to the approvals, if we're going to have this one managed through an email chain or managed through a CSV, who wants to look through a massive email chain to see what's going on? I don't. It's going to be a headache. So again, simplifying it there. And then finally, that personal reimbursements. Again, if that's manual, it's taking up so much time to fill out that information. Whereas if you automate it through digitizing it, setting up on wheel, as I said, make it easy for them, they'll make it easy for you.
Perfect. Thanks, Steffi. All right, we're nearly towards the end of our session. Have had 1 or 2 questions come through that I'll read out. But just a reminder there, if there were any other questions, to drop them in that Q&A box and we'll answer them. So Jessie, I had one come through about Xero. So just asking, can the receipts be sent through to Xero?
Yeah, absolutely. Every transaction that comes through, as long as the staff member has uploaded that tax invoice, it will flow through onto the spend money or the bill in Xero.
Yeah, perfect. And the second one, I think they're asking, is Wheel available in all areas? So I guess including rural or, in all.
Yeah. No, that's a really good question, because some of the times I'm dealing with organizations, they don't, it's a software that's sort of, it's new, really, virtual cards. Something that's interesting is, virtual cards don't need an internet connection to use. So if I'm rural, I can use my card anywhere. The transaction's still going to be made. So yeah, you really can use it in almost every situation.
Perfect. All right. I think we're nearly at the end. We just have one more poll question. So thank you for everyone who has stayed through to the end. I know we're a couple of minutes over. And Jessie, if you can move to the next slide. Just that, we've sort of scratched the surface on a few things about Wheel today and how Wheel can help, I guess, bring you best practice spend management in your business through helping enforce your expense policy and keep everyone on track with spending. But if you'd like, I guess, to learn more about who we are, what we do, if you'd just like a yarn with Jessie, he's always up for it. So let us know. If you'd like someone to reach out, or if you'd just like us to send you some more information over email, or if it's not the right time right now as well, that's okay too. But yeah, just let us know. Give that a few more seconds. Cool. Otherwise, sorry, 1 second. Otherwise, I think that takes us to the end of our session today. Perfect. Whoop. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll see you at the next webinar, I guess.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
See you soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.